forward to force his arm up to his head and establish the mount. From side control, place your knee on the stomach, walk your hand up, establish the mount. One more time. Now I will spar with my brother from side control using the techniques I demonstrated. The first thing you want to do when you reach the mount position is establish control. If you fail to control your opponent, you will lose the position. So you want to mount a little low on your opponent's body and spread out. You can lock your legs underneath your opponent's legs or not. It depends upon what you feel is most comfortable. Just make sure you have a solid base and you're spread out. When your opponent begins to buck and thrash to escape the position, you want to support yourself with your hands. This is very important. And your legs are always supporting you, helping you maintain the position. If you don't have the proper positioning with your legs, he can push your hips. If your opponent pushes your hips in an attempt to strip you off the mount, lower your hips and keep your legs hooked underneath his legs. If you don't do it correctly, he will be able to elevate your hips and potentially escape. So I brace myself as he tries to buck me to one side or the other. When he attempts to push me off of him, I lower my hips and lift his legs using my legs. Once you stabilize the position, you have various options. As long as you remain nice and tight, you can move up his body a little bit. Then I place my hand on his throat to keep his head pinned to the mat as I posture up. If you posture up without placing a hand on your opponent's neck, then he can move his head from side to side and avoid your strikes. When you have a hand pressing down into his throat, you can land clean strikes. You can elbow, punch, 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 elbow. Instead of trying to escape the position, your opponent will focus on trying to protect himself. When this occurs, you can continue to strike or set up an arm lock. So, from the mount, I will hit my opponent to set up the arm lock. When he elevates his arms to protect himself, I will scoot my body even higher on his body. Then, I will slide my foot up by his head. It is important to remain nice and tight and sit your weight on your opponent's chest to prevent him from moving. With my opponent pinned, I hook my right arm around his left arm and sit back. From there, I move my right leg over his head, pull on his arm, and finish the submission. One more time. I mount and stabilize the position. He moves, and I brace myself with my arms. Other side. I begin by stabilizing the mount. One more time on the other side.
Quadril baixo. Levanta, levanta. Levanta. Levanta.
I stabilize the mount, keeping my hips low. Now I spar with my brother from the mount position. Here I demonstrate how to establish the back position when your opponent is on all fours. While on my opponent's side, he keeps his elbows tucked tightly to his legs to prevent me from obtaining control of his body. To create an opening, I strike him in the head. To prevent himself from taking damage, he elevates his right elbow up to his head. The instant he does this, he creates space between his elbow and leg. That's when I step my right foot into the gap and establish my first hook. Wrapping my right leg around the inside of his right leg, I slide my right arm around the right side of his neck and underneath his body. The instant I land on my back, I establish my second hook by wrapping my left leg over the top of his left leg. Now I have excellent control over my opponent and can begin working for a submission. Once more, kneeling on the side of my opponent with one arm wrapped over his body, I begin striking him in the head. When he lifts his right elbow to defend my shots, I establish my first hook with my right leg. Wrapping up his upper body, I pull him on top of me. My opponent is on all fours, and I'm on his side, controlling him with one arm wrapped over his back. I hit him to create an opening, step my foot into the gap, hug his body, and pull him on top of me. Notice how I establish an underhook on the arm opposite to the side of my leg hook. This will keep him from rolling face to face with me during the brief transition to my back. Now I show how to apply a rear naked choke when you take your opponent's back. First off, it is very important that you establish both of your hooks using your legs. This prevents your opponent from turning into you and landing in your guard. Sometimes it helps to use the strength of your legs to spread your opponent's legs. If you can do this, it will be even more difficult for him to turn his body. However, you never want to cross your feet because it allows your opponent to apply a leg lock. You want to keep your legs parallel to one another. When you accomplish this, you want to establish over-under control. To do this, wrap one arm over his shoulder and your other arm underneath his arm. With the arm that's not wrapped around your opponent's neck, use it to control his arm. Then, pull your opponent down on top of you. You don't want the arm that's over your opponent's shoulder to be loose. You want to wrap it tight around his neck, reaching toward your opposite shoulder. Once you reach this position, let go of your opponent's arm, bring your arm up, and lock in the hold. The choke will work when you place your hand on top of your opponent's head, but it works even better when you can get your hand underneath your opponent's head. Really lock the choke tight. Notice here my palm of my left hand is facing me during the choke, not the back of Shinzo's head. This can sometimes be hard to accomplish in an MMA fight with the extra bulk of the gloves, but it does make for a tighter strangle. To force your opponent to tap, all you have to do is squeeze everything tight. Once again, you never want to cross your legs. If you forget and cross them by mistake, your opponent will most likely apply a quick leg lock. So always keep your legs open, use them to spread your opponent's legs. Then, pull him down on top of you and secure the choke. If your opponent defends against the choke using his arm, change sides. If he attempts to prevent the choke by tucking his chin, drive a hand underneath his nose, lift his chin up, and then apply the choke. So, close the gap and he will tap. Once more, I bring my opponent onto me. Now I demonstrate how to submit your opponent with an armbar from the back position.